at det er lettere, når vi løber parallelt i takt. Så kommer jeg på, hvor jeg var på vej hen.
The aspect of the grains, it added this element of sound to the movement in this piece, which is very unique. I've never seen anything like this before in a movement piece. There's one moment he's being showered in it, which was such a visually strong moment, and then shaking it off of him. One I noticed throughout was subtle moments are amplified, even if it's just a shuffling of a foot. The sound amplifies the movement. And so we're having a visual experience, but also an auditory experience at the same time. And then the use of sound becomes this prevalent constant throughout the piece in all the various scenes, whether it's use of voice or tapping on the ground or the things pouring out or the opening or closing. It was a lot of focus on the environment and use of the ambient sounds in the environment, like the acoustics and things like that, but then also the actual created sounds from the granular sounds of the grain, or the actual like sound of the wood being tapped with stilts. So it was a nice combination. It was sort of a choreography of movement, but also a choreography of sounds as well.
Well, I enjoyed this intro. Very interesting how we see a stairway in the frame and the dancer's hands and the fingers are exploring the stairway without seeing the actual dancers themselves. I enjoyed the voiceover of the monologue, which seems to be a poem recited that expresses the longing for a loved one to arrive and what the waiting is like. I enjoyed the texture play with the cornflakes cereal under the dancer's feet and the sound, and it makes you imagine how that must feel. In part 3, where the duet couple are opening and closing the little drawers from the index card boxes, I wondered if the spillage of the cereal was something like a metaphor for relationships and when you're discussing your past and sharing information and how there's an over amount of that can be done and it causes a spillage. The part 5, gorgeous setting in this old library, I suppose, and the dancers are on the stilts. It's just really striking, and it kind of makes you want to jump into it and just try being in that space.
The aesthetic of this film was beautiful. The framing was very well done. The cinematography blew my mind away. It was very carefully crafted within these two people moving within each other. I'm partly convinced that the first part wasn't an ode to the girl, but an ode to cornflakes, because it was using cereal to really get how this guy was feeling, like he was literally bathing in the cereal. You kind of understand more of what's going on when you get into part 2 with the girl's phrase, and you're understanding they're just moving by each other without ever really connecting, and then they're arguing over what is like a old card slots for like a library. And I really like the ending where they're walking around on the library ladders in an empty library. It was humorous, but they're still walking around each other without actually talking with each other. The point of this, you get that there's people can live together without ever actually communicating with each other and growing apart. But what really does set this film apart is both the score, where sometimes there's not even a score, they're just using the natural sounds, then blending in a music score with it while going in and out of them. But the real selling point of this is the gorgeous cinematography.
I think that it's so interesting to see people express through dance anyway in general, but also to tell a story with minimal dialogue and just kind of trying to get your points across through movement, through the extra things, the scene, the locations, things like that, instead of through talking. And I think it's so interesting to see that and to, you know, kind of, I feel like there's way more room for interpretation when taking in a film, especially like this one, where, like I said, there's minimal dialogue. There's a little bit, but there's minimal dialogue, and it's so interesting. And to have the two dancers be, you know, separate at times, together at times, how they're kind of interacting with themselves and with their, you know, environment. I also really loved how interactive and almost sensory their environment was, with the textures and the depth and the and just straight up sensory. You could hear, or, you know, when he stands on something, you could almost feel the crunch of it. So I thought this was kind of weird, but in a good way. And watching it, I just felt, like I said, I felt like it was really sensory, and how they were dancing with themselves at first by themselves, and then how they had kind of come together. It was still just as sensory, but now they were just, you know, interacting with each other. I thought added a really interesting mix to it.